Ahoy hoy dadders! If this is your first time with us, welcome! And if you're coming from a previous episode, hey, we love to see it and I'm so glad you're here. It's season 16! The first season passed the 300 episode milestone. Now of course it also came out in 2021, so yeah, a non-zero amount of production on the season was done during the dark times. This is definitely a season of American Dad, and while I'm not going to say it's bad by any means, it is a product of the time it came out, and you have to have some leeway with shows that were produced during this period. So with that being said, what worked? What failed? Can we decalcify our third eye and prevail? There's only one way that can be seen. It's to review Season 16! This is like tripping on your feet right out the gate and just face planting full force into the track. Who Smarted opens with Haley being embarrassed by how dumb Jeff is, and they present it in an honestly astounding way. Like, he is baffling dumb even by Jeff's standards. So, Jeff, feeling dejected, goes to get an intelligence enhancement to show Haley he can be just as good as the other intellectuals. And I think I know why I have such a problem starting in this season. Dr. Weitzman. He's been around since the very beginning, but this season he is really involved, and I gotta say, it just doesn't work. I am not a fan. I would even say I hate Dr. Weitzman. The ironic thing is, Dr. Weitzman is played by Matt Weitzman, one of the creators and writers on the show, who actually does great comedic work. He is a great writer. He's a very talented person, but Dr. Weitzman, can't stand him. I think he's one of the worst additions to the entire show, and we'll get into that. Season 16 onwards, I don't think there's a single moment where I have even chuckled at something he says. It's like he just throws things off whenever he shows up. But at least, hey, it's not like there's an A story this season about him kidnapping the family and trapping them in a buffet. that would be really, really, really dumb. Really dumb. The B story is, I guess, interwoven into the A story, with Roger getting bit by a snake, helping Stan wrangle animals, and then discovering how much you can sell anti-venom for, and begins trying to clack snakes with Steve, and yeah, gets bit. A lot. Jeff gets too smart for Haley, so she tries to dumb him back down, and they break up, where she gets a really odd new boyfriend, and Jeff is used as the stud for an intelligence think tank, literally. It's a season premiere. I don't really have a word for it. To start your season on this and then just kind of stumble feels like this was not intentional. There are good jokes interspersed throughout the episode, but as a whole, just beat for beat, it did not work. Who Smarted is like a 5 or even 4 out of 10 that hopefully proves there's nowhere to go but up. I will say Paget Brewster and Thomas Lennon do bring great performances to the episode like they usually do, and it should be appreciated, but yeah, it's to the service of effectively nothing. Stan picks up an American Girl doll to use for a CIA mission, and he becomes best friends with it. Yep, that's the whole episode. Stan is slowly losing his sanity. Oh, and someone is hunting down each member of B12. Hey, there we go. There's something. Klaus helps Roger file his taxes. And Dr. Weitzman swaps Haley and Jeff's mind, so, you know, that's cool. The episode is also really referential, and it just feels exaggerated. I don't know. It doesn't land. I wrote a poem about ham once, and then my friend took my carving position from me. You could have just mentioned the ham poem and not explained the entire A story of that episode. Oh boy, Klaus is going through all of the Roger personas and they have wacky deductions on their taxes. It honestly feels like a series of bumps just smashed together in an A story. Oh man, Stan teams up with a collection of American Girl dolls he envisions as secret agents with unique talents to infiltrate a Russian mobster's home to get back Piper as he gets lost in his delusions. There is so much going on in this episode, and yet there isn't. The A story is honestly pretty short compared to other episodes, and even the B12 killer is just there. They keep mentioning it, and then just swoop, out the window he falls, plot resolved, there you go, no worries. There's only so many ways you can say an episode doesn't work, but this is just especially bizarre. I don't know. If you like the episode, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to find out why. It's not offensive or gratuitous, it's just nothing. It's like a 4 out of 10 that just teeters along. I was stone-faced the entire episode, and I hate that. I hate that I was unmoved one way or another. Klaus doing Roger's taxes should be funny. It could be done in a funny way, but I feel like it would have worked better with one Roger persona just having a ton of wacky taxes instead of just shotgunning some old personas out. Oh, but it's self-referential. If you saw previous episodes, you get it. And? It's self-referential, but is it funny? Is it creative and adding to these personas in any way? The only ones that actually felt elevated by including them was Raider Dave and Ricky Spanish. Those two were the closest to an actual solid joke. Russian Doll is just, yeah, it's an episode, I guess. It's 20 minutes of what am I watching? Stan's college friend moved to Chicago to become a comedian and got picked up by Second City Theater and then S&L, not to be confused with SNL. Get it? Do you get it? Anyway, Stan is jealous of Dave and believes it should be him succeeding in comedy, so Stan decides to move out to Chicago to make it big after the family tells him he's not funny. The B story follows Steve and Haley having a night in with Roger. The B story isn't even established until 10 minutes into a 20-minute episode. It's just there and maybe 90 seconds long. Nothing really there. Meaning the bulk of the episode is Stan being obviously horrible at comedy and going undercover at S&L and living his dream and wanting to go back to the CIA. It is so genuinely boring. Every time Stan does his stand-up, it just takes all the wind out of the sails. It's not good. The other episodes, I think an argument could be made for. But this one, I don't think so. It's just a mind-numbing 3 out of 10 that feels hollow. Like, I've spent the last 15 seasons talking about how great this show is, how it gels and is a gem of adult comedy. I don't like disliking episodes. I don't want to bash them. I want them all to be great. But this opening stretch has just been brutal. It just feels like padding. The worst thing a show can be is boring, and it takes a truly numb experience for me to be bored watching American Dad. But this episode was that low point. This is one of the worst episodes of the entire show. It truly is always darkest before the dawn. It is genuinely baffling how quickly the episodes smack back into form. Shakedown Steve is, in fact, a pretty solid episode of American Dad focusing on everyone's favorite duo, Steve and Jeff. Yeah, this is like the third time it's happened in the entire series, including when he had to carry Steve's digital corpse everywhere. Steve is upset he doesn't have a brother after even Billy shows off he has a new brother that Dr. Calgary built for him, so he decides to hang out with Jeff and have him be his kind of brother. The B story has Stan getting a coupon for an escape room and the family refusing to leave, and start living in the escape room refusing to solve any of the clues. Jeff takes Steve on the road and Steve capitalizes on Jeff's grilled cheese business. Matthew Illard, aka Shaggy in the live-action Scooby-Doo movies, as well as Scream and a ton of other great movies and shows. He was in Hackers, great little movie. Anyway, both him and sports icon Bill Walton guest star and do a fantastic job. I mean, there's not a lot to say other than this is that much-needed breath of fresh air. Steve and Jeff run afoul of the nitrous mafia? Delightful! A Wook eats all their cheese and bread? They do be doing that. Where Stan moves to Chicago made me question years of content creation and passion. Shakedown Steve brought me back to laughing hysterically and loving every minute of it. 9 or even 10 out of 10 episode that makes you feel like you're finally in season 16. I mean, only season 16 can have an escape room B story that takes a very dark turn very quickly, juxtaposed with not Pokemon flying up in the air and getting a wish at a fish concert. It's magical. It's absolutely magical. Everything about this episode hits what it needs to hit. Like, everything was just build up for something better. This is how things turn around! Klaus is super popular on the yearly trip to the Dude Ranch and is excited to go. Except this year, Rogu is tagging along, and everyone seems to love Rogu more than him. Noel, the leader of the ranch, is played by Timothy Oliphant of Fargo, Santa Clarita Diet, and Justified fame. Did you know Chadwick Boseman guest starred in an episode of Justified? Black Panther was an up-and-coming magician. Now you know. I don't know. Stan loves a party donkey, I guess. It's a Klaus and Rogu episode. It hangs on you liking either character enough that you'd be willing to invest time into a wacky adventure where Klaus tries to leave Rogu in the woods for dead, and then Rogu turns around and vows revenge. You want that? You want Rogu hunting Klaus while Stan sings about a donkey? That's not fair. Here I am lashing out at things, but the song is actually sweet. Again, Kevin Michael Richardson, I know I've talked about how great he is, but seriously, imagine having to sing in Billy's voice. Imagine having to stay that nasally and maintain it while also hitting the right beats. I've tried. It's a very hard thing to do. Like, there's a reason he's one of the best. And the fact that I can talk about that shows I just don't have anything to talk about with this episode. If you like Klaus and Rogu, you'll probably think it's like a 7 out of 10. If you don't like them, like a 3 out of 10. Personally, it's not as bad as Stan Goes to Chicago, so it's at least a 5 out of 10 for me. It's not great, but man, it's better than nothing sometimes, I guess. See, this is a perfect example of why it feels like such an uneven season. Why some episodes just feel slapped in there for padding. The Wonder Cabinet opens with career day at school, and Steve is disillusioned with the idea that no matter what career he picks, he's going to just be a miserable adult. The part with the Candyman? Amazing, incredible, downright masterful. The radio guy, wonderful. The Candyman? Also strengthened by him being played by Patton Oswalt. And so yeah, Steve is miserable until he hears Palmer on the radio talking about the mind's eye. Palmer being voiced by Andrew WK, singer of that hit song, Party, Party, Party. Honestly, I swear I always thought Palmer was voiced by Adam Conover, but the more you know. You wanna know something wild? Something just so weird and out there? Andrew WK made an official Bondi-sanctioned English audio Gundam soundtrack cover album for the anniversary. Listen to it sometime. It's actually really, really good. Unlike the last episode, I just really like that fact and want more people to know about it. Tell your friends! JB Smoove, Yvette Nicole Brown, Dan Navarro. I mean, this episode is stacked with talent and it's to the service of one of the best episodes of the season. I haven't even gotten into the B story either. Roger is the bang van driver who dreams of one day not being the driver, but being the star. It's great. He has a new protege who steals his thunder. It's amazing. It has so many layers and it feels like an actual episode. Steve becomes an ascended being and Stan does everything in his power to try and bring back his son, and it's a really touching story that ends with two gods appreciating Chimdale. Like, this is the American Dad I came for. This is what I wanted. More of this. Less of Russian Doll. This is a 10 out of 10 that is a perfect showcase of both Steve and the boys and a Steve and Stan adventure. Stan is just going around measuring the moisture of wood to see where they're going, and it's delightful. Every element I think back to in the episode just works. It is honestly probably one of the funniest episodes of the entire TBS era. Little Bonnie Ramirez is not the funniest episode of the season. But you know what? You know what? It's not that bad. It's actually pretty good. It's just a Roger and Francine episode, and that's actually really solid. After Francine gets bored of Roger's personas, he keeps trying to impress her until he falls back on a tried and true legend, Little Bonnie Ramirez, a pageant queen little girl that was kidnapped years ago. Now she's returned and Francine is framed and charged for her disappearance. Roger then battles himself in court while the family tries to adjust and struggles to figure out what they're going to do with the family cruise if Francine can't come, eventually settling on taking the actor that played Francine in the reenactment of her horrible crime. Honestly, it's an episode that you feel like could have been one of the best of the Fox era. It felt like an old friend. This is excellent writing, especially having Roger screw up every step of the way with unabashed confidence. Josh Robert Thompson does a Robert Stack impression for an Unsolved Mysteries bit that might be the funniest joke of the season. The kid that can draw Manny from Modern Family perfectly, even though he's never seen the show, is just perfect, no notes. It's not a 10 out of 10, but it's a 9 out of 10 that keeps that feeling alive as you just feel okay for a change. Little Bonnie Ramirez was found. The nation can sleep once more. Man, things are really turning around. I'm really glad that things have started to really kind of balance out. We're grooving. Things are gonna be okay. I don't know what to do with this season. I'm losing my mind. I am just gonna lose it, dog. Stan decides that the family needs to be more like him. Hey, something we've seen before. So, how does he do it? Does he take him on a little camping trip to the woods? Maybe he goes to a gun range or something? No, he splices their DNA with some of his own. He gives them giant chins and makes them exact copies of himself to win a bed race. Don't worry, it all then goes on to infect the entire city to make them all stand. It's like that one episode of Rick and Morty where everyone falls in love with Morty and it's all chaos and they have to change timelines and bugs and all that. Remember that? Right? Well, replace alternate timelines with all of this was done to win a bed race, and you're halfway there on why this is a dumb episode. To its credit, the B story is dumb, but intentionally so. Lewis, Jeff, and Roger are going to the mountains to shred some fresh pow-pow, and they just idiot their way around. They're just dumb for the sake of being dumb, and you know what? It absolutely works, because every time it cuts to them getting trapped in the snow more and more, it feels like that much more of a reprieve from these giant chin monstrosities haunting my dreams. 3 out of 10 A story, 7 out of 10 B story. Numbers don't matter. Math is a lie. I don't know. 5 out of 10. Who cares? It's also the worst version of this story trope. I honestly don't know which is worse, this or Father's Days. Here, he is actually adjusting their DNA with the help of, you guessed it, Dr. Weitzman of all people, and there he was wiping their memories. I'm inclined to think this is worse and just proves that if Dr. Weitzman is involved, it's usually not one of the better episodes. That does have some exceptions, but law of averages, he sucks. I'm conflicted on this episode. This episode can be hard to watch and can be what one would call triggering for harmful relationships. However, it is a pretty solid episode of American Dad. When Klaus discovers Roger has an innate talent for painting, he encourages him to pursue his passion, and Roger confesses to using Klaus as a muse, which causes them to grow closer. And then, of course, Roger becomes Roger, a self-obsessed artist with an inflated ego that abuses Klaus and leaves him by the wayside. Klaus moves on, gets a job at Panera, tries his best to go back to his old life, but the world of art is just too enticing to ever truly run from. The A story is a lot, but I think D. Bradley Baker actually gives one of his best performances as Klaus this episode that really does humanize this crazy fish. His delivery has so much depth to it that it makes such a heavy story still feel satirical. It works because of the talent of the actors at play. When you have such amazing voice actors, you can take those chances. You can go for a bit of an edgier narrative because they can hang on to it. The B story to this poignant tour de force of animated emotion is Francine, Haley, and Stan raging cross-country in their armored tank to attack Bazooka Shark management for ignoring their ideas to save the team. Mused and abused can be a lot for some people, but if you can make it through to the end, it's a really solid 8 out of 10, even 9 out of 10, that showcases again how American Dad can handle the weight of the emotion at play while still making dumb B stories like Stan and Francine missing an entire season of arena football to just rage. It's a great episode that deserves to be properly appreciated and enjoyed. Huge props to Carlos Alzaraki for this episode where he plays Stan's childhood imaginary friend and very real person his dad hired, Henderson. I mean, the man has a huge catalog of work. He was Rocco in Rocco's Modern Life, you know. The man is an absolute legend of voice acting and he's front and center. Basically, yeah, Henderson comes back into the Smith life and Francine pays him off to keep pretending that he's Stan's imaginary friend instead of ruining it for him. He starts recommending things for him to do with Francine and rebuilds the relationship until Stan believes he's magical just a little too strongly, and yeah, Francine ends up traumatized for her trouble. The B story? Klaus has got Danuta on the rebound, but he needs a sick new bowl to impress her. So he asks Jeff to forge him the perfect bowl, including no less than 2 Pickle Ricks. This B story is one of the best of the entire season. The entire TBS age. I laughed so hard I cried as Klaus melted his way to the core of the earth. This is peak comedy right here. Henderson is again another really solid 8 to 9 out of 10 that really shows off how the season fluctuates. Sometimes you have really great episodes and others you just zone out and blank on. It makes me miss the season 12s and 13s of yore. But it makes sense, it's a tragic but understandable thing. Who knows how many episodes they'd already had made before the event happened? Who knows how production had to change to make these episodes work? Sure, the animation as a whole and voice acting didn't seem to downgrade, but the writing noticeably did on quite a few episodes. That being said, a lot stronger showing than I remembered this season. I've gotten flack for reviews in the past. I'm too nice, or I hate someone's favorite episode, or I don't know what I'm talking about. But of all the other reviews I've done, this might be the most divisive. There is no B story to this episode. There is just Scoop. Haley takes Journalism 101 and discovers that journalism is dead, while also discovering a girl that has a pretty great butt and compliments her on it. Haley is now determined to find a scoop all her own, and she decides to hunt down the great butt to a studio called HG, led by Holly Graham. Holly Graham. Anyway, it's a fitness cult, and Francine, former cult leader and member, and Roger get sucked in, even traveling internationally and surrendering their passports to move up closer in Holly's circle. Haley, Francine, and Roger are at their dumbest and most petty this episode, and honestly, it really kind of works. Everything flows and you feel the competition between them all the way until you see the cord under Holly Graham's feet. I haven't talked much about John Daly, but sometimes a role is just made for someone. Sometimes lightning gets caught in a bottle and needs to be unleashed thanks to Percy Jackson or whatever. I don't read books. John Daly has been in the show several times before. However, his role as Man on Toilet is inspired. The first time I watched it, I thought I was going to die. I was laughing so hard. My chest hurt afterwards. I took a break from watching this episode because the moment I saw him, I just started cracking up all over again. "Put me back on the toilet" is one of the best lines ever uttered in the history of television. This is elevated acting and brings the whole episode together. I told you this would be divisive. Hot Scoop is my favorite episode of the season and an unquestioned 10 out of 10. Hot Scoop is chaos perfected. It sticks to what it knows and walks that fine line like a pro. This is what prime American Dad looks like. This isn't. This is not what prime American Dad looks like. This is bad. Stan wants to be a lumberjack and has no talent whatsoever, whereas Jeff is super talented and a natural wood splitter. So Stan begrudgingly teams up with Jeff as Jeff carries him through competitions, all while Stan trains with Roger, who is just a drunk lumberjack champion or what. I don't know, I don't care. Stan sabotages the competition with Jeff, they get lost in the woods after a plane gets sawed in half, Stan takes credit for rescuing them, it's a whole thing. Meanwhile, the B story has Steve, Francine, Snot, and secretly Klaus all competing to keep their hands on a car, and the last one standing wins. I'll admit, the B story does outshine the A story by a mile. I think it's just how horrible Stan treats Jeff and how outlandish it gets. The lumberjack crew are fun for the short time they're around, but ultimately I'm just way more invested in who's gonna get this car. Lumberjerk is just a bad Stan and Jeff episode coupled to a pretty decent B story that could go anywhere and goes in a lot of wonderful directions. It doesn't really do anything new. If you left it on in the background, you might not even notice it's playing. There's stuff in it to appreciate if you actually sit down and watch, but overall it's largely vapid. It does nothing. It has some extreme parts, like some extreme elements, but it just doesn't capitalize with the elements it has. It still holds back. You can feel the restraint in the episode when it's unnecessary. Lumberjerk is a perfectly okay 6 out of 10. It's a time travel episode. Oh boy. Stan and Francine go back in time to settle an argument and run to their old roommate, Radhika, played by Poonam Patel. Stan and Francine go to a couple's dinner with Haley and Jeff and get into an argument, go back in the past. Past Francine flirts with old Stan, and past Stan flirts with old Francine, and yeah, they switch. You've seen it before. But whoa, hang on, what's this? Stan is horrible to young Francine, and so he gets together with Radica and has to learn how to appreciate the effort that goes into a relationship and not letting the fire of love smolder or extinguish. Wasn't that a sweet message the other 17 times we've seen it throughout this show? It's not even the first or best time travel episode. The bulk of the episode falls on Radica being an interesting addition to the episode that she just isn't. And it's not even fair to her character. Sure, there's no B story to pull away from the main episode, but you can't expect a new character to carry all the weight. It's unfair, and she does do her best with what she's given. Admittedly, again, Panam Patel does try. It is not her fault this episode doesn't work. The episode is like a 4 out of 10 that honestly just let itself run in the background. Let it just linger there, and every time you come back, just go, huh. I would be baffled if this was anyone's favorite episode. Out of all the episodes of American Dad, you'd choose this one? You would choose this over everything else. Not in 100 years. This is no one's favorite episode, and it shows. Stan thinks the library is for nerds. Francine uses the bathroom at the library, so Stan never finds out about her embarrassing shame that it was her that destroyed that airplane bathroom with the great brown spackling. Roger teleports Francine into some books, Nicole Byer plays a pyromaniac librarian, and yeah, they had to run through books in order to survive the inferno while hiding Francine's shame from an inquiring Stan, who goes to the dreaded library to find his wife. Flush After Reading is another background episode, but it's one where if it's playing in the background and you catch one of like 4 scenes, you'll sit down and watch it for like 5 minutes. It's nothing groundbreaking, but at least works for what it is, despite the fact it's only a 20-minute episode and it could have put just a wee bit more effort in. It's dumb American Dad fun that pushes what Roger can do just for the sake of a padding episode. Flush After Reading is a 5 out of 10 that isn't offensively bad or anything, it's just largely forgettable. It's vapid and you could easily believe it was just a fever dream. It's not skippable, but if you accidentally miss it, hey, no harm, no foul. To her credit, Nicole Byer is trying. She's a terrific guest star, and I mean, she does bring a lot of energy like usual. It's just unfortunate everything around it just sort of floats away. There is some sharp Francine writing. Dr. Weitzman isn't involved. It's good enough. I like how Stan imagines himself, but it just doesn't have any cohesion. It doesn't come back around. It doesn't feel whole. Flush After Reading is just nothing. Chris Pine is back. Legitimately had no idea he was even in the episode till the rewatch, but my god, he does a great job. You can barely recognize him. Stan is bald. They kept this canon from all the way back in Chimdale, and now he's finally getting hair seeds to fix his lack of hair. The hair surgeon is played by Chris Pine, and once he has hair and functioning kidneys, courtesy of an anonymous Tuttle, Stan gets his hair styled by the one and only Jose Bose, hairstylist to the stars, and Rod Stewart. Just kidding. Love you, Rod. We all know Rod Stewart watches reviews of American Dad on YouTube. I legit had to Google if he's even still alive. He is. He's 78. And played by Matt Mercer in this episode. That's right, it's High Noon, baby Jane. The episode is just Stan trying to not tell it like it is and be honest without being hurtful and understanding. A softer touch sometimes help get a thought across. I gotta say, I really love Comb Over. I think it's hilarious in a lot of places. Sure, towards the end it kind of loses the plot, but it starts with such a strong lead-in that it'd be hard to stick a landing after a stratospheric jump like that. The episode is a solid 8 out of 10 that you find new things to appreciate about with each rewatch. It's one of the better Stan and Roger adventures, and while not the best, does perfectly showcase a world where Roger actually has low self-esteem. While a rare element, it does work for him and honestly makes the episode as a whole that much stronger. It's a solid plot that doesn't need a B story to pull away from it. And speaking of plots... plot heavy! Get it? Scottie Pippen guest stars. The family goes to visit their cemetery plots for a picnic just to find out that Stan sold the plots for some quick cash for some jet skis since he's the decision maker. The family decides to get their plots back one way or another and decide to open a cemetery in the backyard and ignore all of Stan's ideas, even telling him to take a back seat while they run things. He keeps getting pushed back as the family keeps barreling ahead and tossing corpse after corpse in the backyard with no real plan or structure until they eventually need Stan's help, and honestly, it feels like the payoff to Hurricane from like 8 seasons ago. In that episode, the whole My College Javelin idea had him being bad in crises and learning to just keep trying is rewarded with him hurting his family more and more. Here, he actually finds a solution for everything because he's the idea guy. Even if he has bad ideas sometimes, he's still always thinking of solutions, and honestly, it's a really strong episode for Stan. Haley and Steve both have great dialogue, and Scottie Pippen is a fun inclusion. I don't know what it is about Paul F. Tompkins as a cemetery owner, but him telling Stan to whiff the pig is just constantly stuck in my head now. He just has such a one-of-a-kind voice, and it's delightful to hear him whenever he pops up. I walked into Plot Heavy expecting to be bored and came out enjoying it all the way to the credits. It's a solid 8 out of 10 that gives you a good dose of that controlled chaos that makes American Dad one of the greatest shows ever made. Haley has a new friend, Eunice, who is older. Stan references the old Stan the Mountain. Things happen. Haley is afraid of becoming like Francine, and Roger thinks his improv troupe wants him out. Because they do, because he's horrible. You've seen the story 100 times before. Turns out, Eunice is a mad scientist that wants to harvest Haley and Jeff's youth, and Haley learns to appreciate Francine as the older couple gets ready to do their body snatch. It's a really solid Francine and Haley episode. Much like the Wonder Cabinet, it's nice to have these family episodes that don't completely destroy the dynamics, but rather uplifts them and shows that a family can love one another. What a concept. Hate to think that that's what I get compared to Family Guy, but, you know, I'll take a loving family that supports each other. It's not hard to write, actually pretty easy. The A story isn't like, say, Rabbit Ears, where it's largely dealt with serious tones. Here, there is a comedic tone to the darker elements, and it works for the episode as a whole. And all of this without even talking about the B story. Roger basically starting his own improv troupe when he realizes he can't trust the other members, and gets Steve and the gang in on it. He gets even more paranoid, kicks them out, and thinks that everyone else is funnier than he is, and starts falling apart all over again, until he's hiring people off the street just to make himself look better. It's a pretty solid episode that is probably one of the stronger Haley and Francine adventures. Eunice felt a little cliche, but if I'm complaining about an old lady, I got bigger fish to fry. The Sinister Fate is a menacing 8 out of 10. Haley and Jeff run into Roger's persona, Dr. Sonny Sunderson, who strives to help the planet with his solar technology. They decide to help him streamline his business and install the solar panels he needs to make his clean world a reality. Stan is on the hunt for a TV listings booklet thief. This episode has a cutaway gag in it. It's rare for those to happen in American Dad, and rarer still for them to be so obvious, and yet still really well done. Dr. Sunderson's Sunsuckers is a very special American Dad episode. It's not my favorite of the season when Scoop exists, obviously, but it's a perfect example of peak daddage. It's a great Haley, Jeff, and Roger episode that honestly needs to be seen. The third act of the episode is just so bizarre and dark in an almost beautiful way, and I know that sounds like AI wrote that sentence, but you just kind of have to trust me on it. Sunsuckers is a perfect example of when evaluating sitcom plot development, especially adult animation plot mapping. This is a formula that hits each beat masterfully and interweaves all these different tropes into something really magical. I went into Sunsuckers knowing I enjoyed it the first time around, but revisiting it, I don't know. I see something really special in that sunlit sky. I know it's been said, but Seth MacFarlane really does a great job as Roger, and it adds so much to this episode as a whole. Even the little Stan story is great. This is a 10 out of 10 episode that feels like the clouds of mediocrity have parted. We have only 4 episodes left, and this is the level of quality I have to look forward to? I will want for nothing! The family go to a restaurant where they're drugged by Dr. Weitzman and used as stand-ins for his family. Meanwhile, Roger is depressed and decides that his new persona is going to be a flower, and he goes on a wild journey of theft and debauchery. Want to know the worst part of this episode? Stephanie Beatrice is in this episode. One of the best comedic talents of the modern age, who did a solid job in Twisted Metal of all things. Like, of all the things, she's in Twisted Metal, and it's not bad. It's surprising. And she's stuck in Family Time. I feel so sorry for her. She deserved a better episode. Yeah, no, this is the worst episode of the season. This is bad. This is just genuinely not good. Dr. Weitzman is insufferable. If I had to pick a villain for the entirety of American Dad, it would be Dr. Weitzman. I hate him. Genuinely, I can't think of an episode that would be better served by just some guy instead of the inclusion of Dr. Weitzman in one more episode. I am sure that Matt Weitzman is a good person. He's a very talented writer. His voice delivery isn't even that bad, and I'm sure this is personal preference, but I seethe with anger whenever I see Dr. Weitzman, because I know what I'm about to get is weapons-grade crap, and I have never been disappointed. Positive of the episode, I like that Stan referenced Frisco Melts. I enjoy Frisco Melts. They're pretty cool. Roger Ebert's favorite fast food restaurant was Steak and Shake, and he said he wanted to take Barack and Michelle Obama there because it's just that good. Live with that pointless information because it's more important than anything you could get out of this episode. There are no jokes that make me laugh. There is nothing insightful or thought-provoking. This is a 1 out of 10 on any scale. This is an episode that, looked at in any lens, is unequivocally garbage. The show is great, one of my favorite of all time, and I know that everyone attached is super talented, and I've said as much across 15 videos. But yeah, no, this is an affront to all that is who we are as a human race. This is the bottom of the barrel. Stan can't cry, so he asks his competitively viable good boy son, Steve, to teach him to be empathetic, even resorting to experiments to just be able to cry on cue. However, after having Steve in therapy open him up, he realizes how horrible it can be to have emotions and has Steve's emotions sealed away right before the crowning of the Best Boy award that he was a shoo-in for. The B story is a very light one, with Roger being a horrible HVAC repairman who reaches out to one of his disgruntled customers, Tuttle, with an overly personal email to apologize for his horrible service. Each cutaway is great, and the continued narrative is peak Roger. Like always, Richard Kind is great as Tuttle, and honestly, it's a little refreshing to have such a simple B story after something like Family Time. Honestly, this episode could have been anything after Family Time and still been like an 8 out of 10 by comparison. But Crybaby really evokes that serenity you feel after a good cry. It's a solid Steve and Stan episode where Stan realizes the importance of the feelings he's bashed Steve for over and over again. It's like Any Which Way But Lose, but with a softer touch. I love how seriously they treat the Best Boy Awards, and honestly, it's great seeing Steve be seriously celebrated for being the good kid that he is. The episode just doesn't feel like it has a mean bone in its body. It's just cruising and giving you the best worst of Stan, and it's a solid 9 out of 10 that is a perfect palate cleanser before we go into what I'm sure is another American Dad banger, and not something that totally ruins the idea of Stan or harms Steve in any way. Stan snoops around the Yoshida estate before Toshi's dad gives him a tour of all the incredible stuff he owns. Reggie Lee really does a good job as Hideki. He always has. He's very good at the character. But I just cannot stand Hideki in a lot of stories. This is no exception. The B story has Klaus and Jeff going to the country for a weekend. Steve mentions his patented Sunday strolls, which are pretty dang legendary. Stan uses Steve's name to get credit cards to take out a ton of debt to impress Hideki, and so he has Roger buy a ton of crystals. Roger takes out a loan from a loan shark, Mike Donkey, played by Joe Manganiello of D&D and Magic Mike fame, which, wow, what a range. Hideki is mildly impressed, and Roger and Stan then have to use the crystals to win Atlantic City to pay the loan shark off, or have Steve's legs broken. The B story with Jeff and Klaus has them in a tranquil little lake town, and they run into one of Klaus's lake boys who's getting married and didn't invite Klaus, so they decide to sabotage the wedding with one of Klaus's tainted IPAs. The B story is fine. I like that Klaus and Jeff are doing something together and their energy works together when done right. The A story, on the other hand, is a whole different beast. Stan doing all this for Hideki sure is on brand, but it's just brutal to Steve for no reason. Steve is just an unwitting victim to the forces that be as he tries to enjoy a delightful Sunday stroll. Like we just saw not last episode what a certifiable good boy Steve is, and then they're breaking his legs because of debt taken out by his dad and Roger in his name? I know it's supposed to be so extreme it's funny, but I just don't think it hits that threshold. Not to mention, all things considered, this is the proper season finale, and we get an episode where Stan betrays Steve and gets into crystals? That's it? No other real resolution? No making up before the end? I don't know. The episode as a whole is okay, I guess. The B story makes it watchable, and the Klaus bits are still pretty solid. It's not an episode I revisit often, but it's one I'd at least watch again. I guess a 5 out of 10. No Christmas special this year, though it will return in Season 17 with The Grange. No, this time it's a Halloween special. It's Halloween week in Langley. Steve is in science club with Snot and Billy, but when Snot leaves and Bartleby the turtle gets run over, Steve turns to Billy and his reanimator for help, and yeah, it's a Reanimator parody. The 1985 classic with some Frankenstein slapped in there for good measure. It's honestly just a solid Halloween episode. I love that the whole town is in on it and they're always wishing more intense greetings to each other to celebrate the holiday. It's delightful. It's a great ride with a lot of B camp references that just feels genuine. The B story with the family drinking formaldehyde against the creative Halloween A story gives you an actually special holiday special. Steve's Franken Out is a really fun adventure and a great Halloween watch. Ironically, where last season I wish 300 was the actual conclusion of the season, here I'm glad Steve's Franken Out is the season finale. It actually works a lot better for a finale than Crystal Clear, and at least lets Steve have an adventure where his legs aren't getting smashed in. Again, huge shout out to Kevin Michael Richardson, who has to basically play 3 characters this episode, and we even get a return of Angelica Huston. The episode is a solid 8 out of 10 and an excellent way to walk away from season 16. It's the best note a shaky season like this could possibly end on. And there we have it, season 16. Anything you think I was right on? Wrong on? What was your favorite episode of the season? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And make sure to share this to let people know we're out here. This was definitely a unique season. It had some of the highest highs and lowest lows, and honestly, still tried to be experimental when it could be. Season 16 did have some phoned-in episodes that seemed to just kind of meander, but then you get something like Hot Scoop or Wonder Cabinet, and you see that they're still trying, despite everything, to make a show that can still make you laugh, that can still evoke some kind of emotion. We're over 300 episodes in, and they still have episodes that feel fresh and unique. If there was ever a bad season of American Dad, this would probably be it. And even then, it still has a ton of qualities to love. It made the best of a bad circumstance, and honestly, there's a lot of diamonds in the rough to appreciate here. That being said, next season we're going to get some great experimental episodes again, including the legendary Gold Top Nuts. We'll have more of Klaus's Boys, and get to see one of the best season finales the show has ever had. So I'll see you all next time when we careen into season 17. Goodbye, everybody. Like always, stay strong, keep fighting that good fight. I'm proud of you, and no matter what, things will get better. That algorithm is gonna pick us up soon. I can feel it. Always forward, never back, never stop, never stopping.